This morning I'd like to read our scripture from Matthew. It's on page 1374 in your pew Bibles, if you'd like to go there with me. I was struggling a little bit last week and wondering what I was going to give a message on this week. I don't do that very often, but I just couldn't quite figure out what part of the Christmas story do I want to go into. And Sharon Hostad happened to be down in the office for a minute, and she said, well, I'm all done with the baptistry. I said, you are? And she said, yes, I am. And so I walked down here and I looked at the baptistry and I said, there it is. There's what I'm going to speak on today. Because to me there's a great confusion about this Magi, the three kings, the wise men, whatever we want to call them, and the gifts that they gave, and how many of them there were, and where did they actually come from? I don't have the answers. Today would be a good stump the pastor Sunday. Where did the Magi come from? Somewhere else. We don't know. But why? More importantly, why did they come? After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. In Bethlehem, in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel. To me, this part of it is it's awesome. It's confusing. Because there's not a lot of answers. I mean, we can understand the angels coming down and singing to the shepherds, because we see shepherds several places throughout the Bible. We can see that a census was being taken. Some king had said, I want to count my people. Typically, after they did a census, there was going to be a war. Not this time. We see that people are on the move and that they're struggling as they land wherever they're going. Some are rich, some are poor. And then there's those in between. Oftentimes we see people traveling and there's no place to stay. Vicki and I do a lot of traveling. Not a lot of traveling. Have done quite a little bit of traveling. And I'm one of those guys that kind of likes to make a reservation at the end of the road. My Vicki loves to go and go and go and find a room when we finally had enough. Well, this could be up to 10 o'clock at night. You ever try to find a motel room at 10 o'clock at night? Yeah. It can be a little difficult. And sometimes we end up driving and driving and driving until we finally land into that locked spot. And I hate to admit it, but we are motel snobs. We like to stay in a nice place. Not an expensive place, but a nice place. Sometimes we have major discussions about this before we even take off on the trip. And I said, did you make reservations? And she said, really? How long have we been married? And so we get in the car and we start driving. And I said, well, you got your cell phone. Why don't you make a reservation? And she smiles and she says, no. We will land where the good Lord wants us to. These Magi, these three kings, these wise men came from a land afar, it says. They rode camels, walked, rode donkeys. I don't know what mode of travel they actually had, but they came miles, thousands of miles, it says. The Bible does give us that fact, thousands of miles. How long would that take to go 10 miles, let alone 100 miles, or 1,000 miles, or thousands of miles? How long would that take? How exhausted would they be? Well, we have to remember, they did not travel the way we travel. They brought their tents, they brought their food, they brought their supplies, they brought their bed. Everything that they needed, they had. And so, yes, getting up in the morning and traveling for 8-10 hours a day would be very exhausting, but they got good rest at night. I think that's a hint. How many of us are traveling even today, and yet at the end of the day we do not get good rest? Why do we not have good rest? Because the end of the road is not clear. We're not sure where we're going. These people, I'm going to assume they were men, so I'm going to call them men. These men did not know for sure exactly where they were going, but they had a point in the sky that was pointing them to the place they were going. But even more so, they had faith in what they knew. Faith in what they had been told. Faith in what was even confusing. Faith in knowing that the Messiah was coming, and now. And they found peace in that. How many of us are walking our faith through peace? How many of us feel peace right now? When we do the silent moment of prayer after our joys and concerns, I struggle with that. Because I want to make sure that everybody has enough time to say their prayer. And I know that some of you don't. And yet I don't want to make some of the rest of us uncomfortable by taking too long. So for me, quite frankly, it's uncomfortable. Because I'm trying to please who I can please. I think that's not my fault. I think life can be very confusing in that same thing. These men knew where they were going, and they knew how to get there. They were prepared for this trek. How many of us are prepared for the traveling that we're doing today, for the trip we are on? How many of us feel very insecure in the trip we are on, in the place we are today? How can we find peace and faith in it? What I would like us to do is possibly look back at our history, look back at the people that influenced their lives and brought us to this very spot today. Who brought us to where we are right now, today? Who did God use, encourage, share his love with to bring us where we are? Even to the place we're sitting right now. What history do we have that caused us to be here? How far back can we go? I remember as a young man, young boy, probably 9, I had a great grandmother that lived across the road from me, the highway. And I would go over there fairly often, and she went to church every single Sunday. And sometimes she would take my brother and I. And it was an Assembly of God church that was fairly charismatic. And I can admit, at 9 years old, when people started standing up and waving their arms, and some of them literally rolling in the aisleway, it was kind of scary. And one day I got the courage to ask my great-grandmother, I said, "Why do you go to that church?" And she had a beautiful laugh. It was just a laugh that a few of her children and grandchildren had. She laughed so loud, and I was just amazed at the laughter. I said, "What are you laughing about?" She said, "I don't know why I go to that church. That's not my church." And yet she'd been going there for a long time. She said, "But it's just a place I landed." She never participated in the extra charismatic things. And I have no problem with charisma and charismatic. She did not participate in that, but she loved to watch the people. And she would make comment to some of them after church. I got to listening to what she was doing after the church service. And she would ask them, "What did you feel today that made you do what you did?" She'd actually put them on the spot. At first it was a little uncomfortable, but people started sharing where they were and why they were sharing what they were sharing. Now, I really don't remember too many of those conversations, but I do remember the laughter. Those people laughed so easily. It was awesome. It was contagious. And I figured out that was why my grandma was there. She loved to laugh. She gave me a Bible, one of those little black Bibles that had the zipper around it, you know, the old King James Version, and it had the pictures in it. It was thin. And she said, "Here, read this." Yeah, right. I looked at the pictures. I asked a few questions. I zipped it up and I put it away. I still have it, believe it or not. In fact, I have my brother's. But without her willingness to share her laughter, I would not be here today, because she made church fun. I would like to encourage us to make worship service an experience that people are hungry for. The Magi, as they were, these students, as they were being taught, one of the interpretations I understood was these could have been Jewish people that had been part of the remnant when the Jews had exited out of Egypt. They could have been in multiple places. It said the Middle East. They could have been in multiple places, and yet they could have been of the tradition of the Jew. And that's why they knew these stories. They knew this prophecy. They understood it, and why they chose that time to go. They could have been astrologers. They could have been watching the stars come into line and knowing what was supposed to happen at those. Those lessons have been lost by a good amount of people, but yet we relive them yearly. It's very important that we are moving and traveling. If we get stuck into the same place and we do not move, what happens to us? We become too quiet. We become stuck. We become so solidified that we cannot move. What I'm trying to get to today is I'm asking us to move in our faith like the Magi did. Be willing to put life aside for a moment and move. Find your star. Find the place that you are to go and start trekking towards it. It will take us the rest of our life to get there. But we can get there. The map is laid out. The plan has been made. The trip has been blessed by God Himself. Are we willing to make that trek? How do we do that? First, reflection. Like I said before, who, or how many of who, brought us to this place today? Where do we go from here? Do we stop here? When we leave this place today, is church done for the week? I hope not. My prayer is that we're still moving in the faith that we can find peace in throughout the day. Sometimes when we're moving, we struggle. We fall down, we get up, we might hurt ourselves. And yet if we're not willing to take on the sacrifice of moving, we have no incentive. We watch people in our lives. We watch situation going on around us. The Magi came to the king. They were respectful to King Herod. They came to him first. They said, we have come into your country. We are here to visit the new Jewish king. And they were just being respectful to allow him to know. And yet, how often do we move through a place and we let people know what we're doing and they feel threatened? Threatened in whatever way. Yes, we do threaten people. People that do not have a clear understanding of what this loving God is, who He is. They feel threatened. They feel that we might want to take away some of their freedoms, some of their power, some of their whatever they have. And yet, what they don't know is, and maybe we don't either, is we are here to enhance their life. I think maybe that's what's happened to a lot of congregations in the past, is that we have endeavored to change a life in a way that is hurtful. Most of us would never dream of hurting somebody. We really don't like to hurt people. We really don't like confrontation. Now, I like a good argument as much as the next man. My son likes it better. He will argue with you, even though he's wrong, just to prove a point, just to have the conversation. He will go 180 degrees of what he actually believes and do all he can do to prove his point, even though he knows it's wrong, just to get us to think. That's our job, to get people to think, to bring them into a place of recognition of who they are, who we are. We are not above them, we are not below them, we are beside them. Just like Jesus is with us. He is beside us. When these men traveled, can you imagine the sand in the shoes the whole time? I mean, just think of that irritation. All the wind that was blowing, the constant amount of dust that they were walking through. Can you imagine how caked they were at the end of the day? How much dust are we allowing to collect on us? Yes, traveling causes turmoil, causes things to be stirred up, and we wear that. But at the end of the day, like them, we are to bring our gift of travel, our gift of belief, our gift of faith to God. And He in turn blesses us by washing us clean. We have to move. We have to travel in order to be washed clean. Are we willing? I hope so. As we're about to come to communion here in a little while, my prayer is that we will move into that spot and do the best we can to hear our God speak to us.